Assalamu alaikum. Peace and the mercy and blessings of Allah be with you all. Thank you for joining me for this live post. Today we're looking at Mark chapter 7. And this is in a series in which we're commenting on the whole Gospel according to Mark. Today it's chapter 7. I'm just going to make sure that I put my phone in a silent mode. Yes, and then we're ready to go. So, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulullah. I begin by praising our Creator and Fashioner, the Creator of the heavens and the earth. I ask Him to send peace and blessings upon all of His prophets, His messengers, all of the righteous people of all time. I ask God to bless you all and all of the people around you and your various countries. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the entire world, protect the environment, protect the plants, the animals, protect all human beings. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give a quick and complete recovery to those who are sick. And may Allah protect the rest of us from COVID-19 and from every other sickness and disease and stress and distress. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Okay, so now to get on with our discussion, I will start with going into the Gospel according to Mark. Where do I find that? I go to BibleHub.com and I navigate to Mark chapter 7. And the first one that comes up at the top is the New International Version. That's good enough for me for this purpose. And so we start. Now, the first section here of this chapter is entitled in the New International Version, That Which Defiles. So there's some discussion here that leads to Mark's conclusion that Jesus declared all foods clean. So let's see what is that, because this is a major point of contention between Muslims and others. Muslims will hold to what they call halal, and our Jewish friends say kosher. So Muslims and Jews are together on one side regarding this, and then on the other side we have our Christian friends saying that they can eat anything and the law no longer applies. So where did that come from? Well, here is one possible passage, and let's see what is happening here. So the Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law, this I'm reading now, Mark chapter 7, verse 1, the Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands which were defiled, that is, unwashed. Now, it says here in parentheses, verses 3 and 4, the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash, and they observe many other traditions, such as the washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law, now we're in verse number 5. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law asked Jesus, why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands? He replied, Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites, as it is written, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules. And then he continues. That was the quotation from Isaiah. And now, verse number 8, you have let go of the commands of God and are holding on to human traditions. And he continued, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses their father and mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father or mother is korban, I read again verse number 11. But you say that if anyone declares that which might have been used to help their father and mother is korban, that is devoted to God, then you no longer let them do anything for their father or mother. Thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many things like that. Now here requires some commentary. Everything was going in a straightforward manner so far, but the translation here of verse number 11 is a little bit awkward, and that's probably because it's like that in the Greek. No fault of the translators, perhaps, but let's parse it. So verse number 11 has it that Jesus is saying to them, you have a way that if something would have been useful to your parents, you dedicate that as a korban, and Muslims say korbani, or sacrifice in the Urdu language. Some Muslims, that is, who are familiar with that language, korbani, or udhiya, a sacrifice. So when this animal is dedicated to be sacrificed to God, then nobody dares to touch that one. This is sacred. This is going to be the sacrifice. So some of these people would dedicate some such property as a qurban, in the service of God, as to be sacrificed for God. And once they dedicate it that way, they cannot use it to help their father or mother. So then that lets them off the hook. If they don't have any wealth, if they don't have any money to give their father or mother, and they say, okay, whatever I had that was dedicated as korban, then they're not serving their parents. And thus they're going contrary to the command of the Bible, which says, honor your father and your mother. And Jesus then says to them in verse number 13, thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many things like that. So in this whole discourse, Jesus is, complaining against their human traditions, and they're insisting on their traditions. And Jesus is saying, no, you just have human traditions. So what about this tradition of eating with unwashed hands? So now further commentary on this, verse number 14. Again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them. And then verse number 17, something is wrong with verse number 16 here. Let me see what they say in the footnote. They say some manuscripts include here the words of 423. So some words from Gospel according to Mark chapter 4 verse number 23 have been inserted into some manuscripts at this point, and would have been represented as verse number 16 in some other versions of the translation. But in this version it is omitted. Verse number 16 here is just blank. That's interesting. Okay, verse number 17. After he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about this parable. Are you so dull, he asked. Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out of the body. In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. And then verse number 20, he went on, what goes out of a person is what defiles them, for it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. I read again verse number 21, for it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. Now, it is interesting that Jesus here is apparently very much having his mind on the Ten Commandments, because look at these the Ten Commandments: thou shalt not commit murder, adultery, stealing, and envy, or desiring what your neighbor has, and so on. So much of this is what is here: deceit, bearing false witness, for example, out of the Ten Commandments. So Jesus has in mind that all of these things are evil. But he's saying that these evil things come out of a person. It's not what goes into the person that defiles the person, it's what comes out. So if all of these things are coming out of the person, it shows that the person's heart is somehow problematic, because the evil things are coming out of that heart, starting with sexual immorality and theft and murder and all of that. So does that mean, though, that Jesus declared all foods clean? You notice here in the translation that the translation of this phrase, of the statement in saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. That part is in parentheses. Why is it in parentheses? It's apparently Mark's own commentary on what Jesus was saying. So in this version of the Bible I'm looking at, New International Version, here on Bible Hub, the words of Jesus are colored in red. And so we have the red coloring before and after this parentheses. This parentheses enclose words in black, a complete statement in black. And it's obviously the commentary from Mark. Mark is saying, in saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. But now think about it. Does this passage indicate that Jesus declared all foods clean? Or is he using what Christian scholars have called hyperbole? He's using exaggeration in order to show the contrast between the minor rules that people are trying to impose and the major follies that they are committing on the other hand. So on the one hand, they're committing major crimes like immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, folly. And on the other hand, they are insisting, okay, you must make sure you wash your hands, make sure you wash all of the utensils and so on when you come back from the marketplace. Well, of course, nowadays, as we know, it's a good idea. If you come back from the marketplace, you got to wash your hands before you touch your food, especially nowadays because of the transmission of the coronavirus. But as a matter of tradition, these people were insisting, okay? They observe many traditions, such as washing the cups, the pitchers, the kettles, and so on. Okay, so they have a lot of detailed rules. And Jesus somehow does not have respect for all of the detailed man-made rules. But does that mean that Jesus is declaring all foods clean? Now, that's a far stretch. And we know from early Christian history, especially as depicted in the Gospel, in the Acts of the Apostles in the Bible, that the earliest Christians were not so clear about what foods are like, what aspects of the Old Testament law can be relaxed on or not, because the matter of clean and unclean foods, this is Old Testament law. It's from the Old Testament that we have it that pork, for example, is prohibited. And the earliest Christians did not have a clear mandate on what to do regarding the non-Jews who come into the faith. So for Jews, this was a given. They're practicing this. They're remaining observant of kosher foods. And obviously staying away from non-kosher. But when it comes to Gentiles, those who are non-Jews, and they embraced the faith, what were they to do? So in Acts chapter 15, a council was held, and that council was presided over by James, the brother of Jesus. And in the end, he gave a ruling in chapter 15, verse number 29, which was to be circulated to all of the churches. And even Paul was to go about circulating this verdict. And the verdict was that they are not going to impose on the Gentiles who embrace Christianity, or who embrace, let's say, the way of Jesus. They were not going to impose on them anything more than these commandments, that they are to stay away from sexual immorality, from the flesh of swine, from the strangled animals, and was it blood? I have to look that up now because, I'm getting old, and if I quote something from memory, I cannot trust my memory. So we go to Acts of the Apostles, and we go to chapter 15. So I've opened a separate window in Bible Hub here, and I go to chapter 15, and I want verse number 29. So verse number 29 says, you are to abstain from food sacrificed to idols, from blood, from the meat of strangled animals, and from sexual immorality. You will do well to avoid these things. Farewell. So that means they're still imposing food rules even on Gentiles. And this is 15 chapters out of about 28 chapters in the Acts of the Apostles. And these 28 chapters span a period of like 3 decades after the ascension of Jesus into heaven. So that means for a long time after Jesus has left the scene, like many chapters of activities are going by, and now we come to chapter 15, halfway through the book, and in that details this 30-year period. And at this point, still, the disciples of Jesus are convening a conference in which now they decide and they promulgate this verdict that everyone has to abide by at least these rules, meaning the Gentiles who want to follow Jesus. As for Jews, they were continuing to observe the difference between kosher and non-kosher foods. So what are the food laws here? They are to abstain from food sacrificed to idols, from blood, just as Muslims, when they slaughter their animals, they make sure the blood is strained out. That's in a reasonable way. And of course, you cannot, use the raw blood. You just take the blood out of the animal. Let's say you capture the blood as you're slaughtering the animal. You capture the blood and then use that to cook with or to drink. No, that's forbidden. Once it is spilled, it has to be disposed of. And the meat of strangled animals. So if the animal is found strangled, as is mentioned in the beginning of the 5th chapter of the Quran and verse number 3, all of these, the strangled animals, these are forbidden for Muslims, according to the Quran. Now we can see that even according to the Bible. So Muslims should be wondering, how do our Christian friends come to the view that they could eat, that they don't have to differentiate between kosher and non-kosher foods. Of course, when we say eat anything, that's a bit of an exaggeration because nobody eats anything. Except the most gross of persons. Everyone distinguishes between some good and some bad and so on. So our Christian friends, what I mean by that is that they do not have a law that prohibits them from eating some specific foods. That's how they say, or that's what they feel. But when we are coming now to look at this in detail, we come to realize that in fact there is a law, and that law was not cancelled by Jesus. So Mark here saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean in verse number 19. That's Mark's comment, but it does not seem to gel with the facts on the ground, because the facts on the ground are that the disciples continued after this, long after this, and even after Jesus left the scene, they continued to distinguish between kosher and non-kosher foods, and now they're even prescribing for the Gentile followers of Jesus that they are to stay away from the meat of strangled animals, from blood, and the flesh of, was it swine? Did I get that right? Food sacrificed to idols. Why did I have swine in my mind here? Let me go to the whole chapter 15. Swine. So they convened this council, and that's verse number 29. So that means pork is now allowed. So verse number 19 says that Peter gave this. James spoke up. James spoke up and said, "We should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. Instead, we should write to them, telling them to abstain from food polluted by idols, from sexual immorality and the meat of strangled animals, and from blood." Oh, okay, that's interesting. Somehow I had in my mind swine, and it's a good thing that we checked the verse, because I would have been misquoting the Bible here, and I didn't want to do that. Okay. So, all right. So both in verse number 19 and in verse number 29, we have they're basically the same list of 4 items, but you see it includes the meat which is sacrificed to idols, and the blood, strangled animals, and sexual immorality. Okay, so we go back then to Mark chapter 7, And we say then, in conclusion, that Jesus, on whom be peace, did not declare all foods clean, contrary to what Mark is saying here. And the person who actually declared all foods clean would be the writer of Ephesians. In Ephesians chapter 2, and I believe that is verse number 14 to 15, but I'm going to look it up very quickly. And by the way, I got a new keyboard that is promising to be silent, and I hope that when I'm typing now, you don't hear the clickety clack of my usual keyboard, which might have been driving some people crazy. Okay, so Ephesians chapter 1 verses number 14 and 15. Let me see what it says here. So speaking of Jesus, it says, who is a deposit guaranteeing our inheritance until the redemption of those who are in God's possession to the praise of his glory. Ephesians chapter 1, maybe I need chapter 2 then. Ephesians chapter 2. Okay, verse 14. Yes, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 14. For he himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one, and has destroyed the barrier and dividing wall of hostility, verse number 15, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations. So, all of its commands and regulations. And somewhere as well, it is mentioned that he declared all foods clean. So if I look that up very quickly, Romans chapter 14, verse 20. Romans chapter 14, verse 20. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food. All food is clean, but it is wrong for a person to eat anything that causes someone else to stumble. So in Ephesians, we have it that the writer is saying, that Jesus destroyed the law with all of his commandments and regulations. So the law no longer applies. That's the writer of Ephesians. Some people think that Paul wrote it. Some think that someone wrote it in the name of Paul. So in any case, this is coming from the Pauline school. And now we have from Paul himself in Romans chapter 14, verse 20, he's saying, all food is clean. All food is clean. So who declared all food is clean? It is Paul in Romans chapter 14, verse 20. And it is obviously not Jesus, despite what Mark has said here in Mark chapter 7, verse number 19. Okay, so we continue. So we can finish this chapter, and then I look at your comments very quickly. Okay, Jesus honors a Syrophoenician woman's faith. I'm going to look at that. Let me just take a quick look here and make sure that everything is right as I can see from your comments. Yes, I don't see anyone saying anything is not working, so I assume that video, audio are all working fine. And I see that Brother Muhammad Mustafa has shared my stream. And thank you, Brother Muhammad, for doing that. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you and bless you, all of the people around you. So I'll finish up my discussion of this chapter, and then I'll come to your questions and comments. All right, so Jesus honors a Syrophoenician, a woman's faith. Verse number 24, Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence a secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in Syria and Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. So he told her, first let the children eat all they want, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. And then she says, Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Okay, so some people criticize this activity that is described here. They say, well, Jesus gave a kind of an impertinent reply. What do you mean? Don't? It's not right to toss the children's bread to the dogs, as if the and that is a commentary on the child of the Syro-Phoenician woman. So there's a distinction here between Jew and Gentile. Jesus is from the Jewish race, and he is apparently looking down on the non-Jew here, and even using the term dog in reference to them. But I'm not so schooled in the history and the I cannot say anything more about this except to say that that is just to let you know that that has been a criticism regarding this. So if you're quoting this incident, just be careful about how you quote it, and don't misrepresent our prophet Jesus, on whom be peace, because we don't want to attribute it to him anything that will lead to such criticism. And then but then looking at this story, what we find here is one of the miraculous events where somebody's possessed by a demon, and Jesus, on whom be peace, either drives the demon out himself, or he just informs the woman that the demon has been driven out, which could mean that God drove out the demon from that woman's daughter due to the woman's faith. Because she kind of accepted the term dogs, and she said, even dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. So it looks like what was being conveyed here in the story is that what Jesus is teaching, and his whole time and effort and everything, that belongs to the Jews. And he's not going to take away from that time to give it to this non-Jewish person and to go deal with her daughter's illness. But this woman had faith, and she's saying, okay, you called me dog, that's fine, but just bear in mind that even a dog would be there eating the crumbs that fall under the table. So give me at least something. Um, then Jesus announces to her that the demon has left your daughter because of your faith. So did God do it? And Jesus is just informing the lady, or did Jesus himself do it? Or was it a kind of an automatic response? The woman expressed the faith, and by her very expression of the faith, automatically the demon just left her daughter. So all of these are possibilities, and God knows best. Even on the third possibility, we would say that God did it. Okay, and then finally, Jesus heals a deaf and mute man. Verse number 31, then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre and went through Sidon down to the Sea of Galilee and into the region of the Decapolis. There, some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hand on him. After he took him aside away from the crowd, Jesus put his fingers into the man's ears. Then he spit and touched the man's tongue. He looked up to heaven, and with a deep sigh said to him, Ephphatha, which means be opened. And now, this word in the Aramaic actually sounds like Arabic. Fatha, it means a kind of an opening. Iftah is open. So iftah, if fatha, he says to the man. It's almost like iftah, open. But in this case, if be open. So this is as form of the verb, which means which has a kind of a reflexive meaning. If fatha, be opened. At this, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak plainly. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. I want to say something about the healing method here. So Jesus he spit and touched the man's tongue. What does that mean? So we know from Islamic tradition that it is said that when the Prophet, peace be upon him, did what is called a tahniq, which is welcoming the new baby into the world. So what he did was he took some of his spittle and mingled it with some the juice of date. And then he placed that on the tongue of the newborn baby. And now, of course, I wouldn't recommend doing that today because of the transmission of the coronavirus and who knows what other viruses and so on we have become aware of through time. So, but in the case of the Prophet, peace be upon him, you can well imagine that people would have been glad to have this done for their babies. Nonetheless, the um, the healing method. See, there's a method, and Jesus is employing that method here by using his spittle and touching the man's tongue with his spittle. He hopes that the man will be cured in this way, and the man is cured. So it does show Jesus having some great power or blessing going with him, but ultimately it is God who effects the cure, like the medicine man, whether it is Jesus or the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, or someone else administering the medicine. The doctor does not have the cure in his or her hands. They just administer the usual treatment, and then we believe it is God who effects the cure. So, nonetheless, for such a marvelous cure to be effected through Jesus shows that Jesus is really special. He's special to Christians. He's special to Muslims, and that's why we're studying the Gospels about his life and teachings, so that we can know more about him. And this will help Muslims and Christians in dialogue with each other, because Muslims will, by knowing this, come to a better understanding of the life and teachings of Jesus as reflected in the Gospels. And so that when we have a dialogue with our Christian friends, the Muslims will come from both angles. The Muslim will know the Muslim presentation of Jesus, and also will know the Christian presentation of Jesus, and will know how to meld the two into a holistic understanding of Jesus, on whom be peace. So that brings me to an end of my commentary on chapter 7. Inshallah, on another occasion, we will go to chapter 8 and onwards. Now, in the meantime, let me just give you the heads up of what's happening. During this week, on Wednesday, inshallah, Wednesday evening, I'll be having a debate with my friend William Albrecht, whom I've debated before on various topics. This time, our topic will be Jesus as the Son of Man. And, in the Gospels, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. So what does that mean? Or does he really refer to himself as the Son of Man? Well, we'll find out. So that's Wednesday. And then next week, on Monday, I'll be debating with a man who is known on the internet as Kabain, who has debated some other people before. Among Muslims, he has debated our brother Sami Zatari. And my debate with him will be on the Jesus of the Gospels or the Jesus of the Quran. So that will come up in a week's time. And then following that, they're coming one after another. On February 2nd, inshallah, I will be debating with Chris Date. Our debate was to be in early January, but due to a personal incident affecting me, we had to postpone that. I asked for that postponement, and I was granted that. So early February, inshallah, February 2nd, for that debate. So all of these will be very interesting events. As I have the info in detail, I'll post it on my Facebook page here, so you can always be updated. And I'll be glad if you can join us for those occasions. So with that in mind, let me then go to your questions and comments, and just rearranging my screen here a little bit. And then I'll just look at your comments very quickly. Okay, so I see here that we have comments from a number of persons. Okay, so thank you all for being here and for commenting. I see Abdul Malik Sulaiman saying Assalamu alaikum, Doctor. Wa alaikum assalam, my brother Abdul Malik. And Mudar Ismail saying Assalamu alaikum. May peace and blessings be with you. Wa alaikum assalam. Peace and blessings be with you as well. And Salu Salman saying Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shabir. May Allah bless you with health and wealth. And certainly, Brother Salu, health is very precious. We don't want to pray for a lot of wealth, because sometimes wealth causes people to deviate, but we pray for guidance from God. And we do pray for sufficient sufficiency in risk, in provision from God, even the risk and wide provisions. But of course, we want it to come with the blessings of God. Thank you for that wonderful prayer. And Sister Lubika is saying, Assalamu alaikum. May God bless you and your family, and you too, my sister. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and all of the people of your country, and especially your family, all of your loved ones. Andrew Barocco saying, Salam, Dr. Shabir. I wanted to say you have the respect of many of us in the Christian community. Thank you for all you do to foster interfaith relations and respectful dialogue. Thank you so much, my friend Andrew, and salam to you. And it's good to hear from our Christian friends as well. And Nidyand Abdul Shakir saying ASAK. What does that mean? Assalamu alaikum. Yes, I got it now. Okay. Wa alaikum salam. Did Matthew copy from Mark? And did Mark know Jesus, on whom be peace? So it is Nidyand, just to give you some background of this, and probably you already know this, but just so everyone is on the same page with this. And Christian scholars have noticed for a long time that Matthew, Mark, and Luke are very similar in the basic outline of stories that they tell regarding Jesus, which itself is remarkable, because if you think of Jesus going through life 1 year, that's 365 days, another year, another 365 days, a third year, it's another 365. So we have about 1,000 days here. Now, if Jesus, if the Gospels reported just one little snippet of information about, each day, like on day 1, they said, okay, this, Jesus got up and brushed his teeth. So day 2, he, as a boy, he went to school. Day 3, of course, he's doing it on all of the days, but, not to avoid repetition, talking about the brushing the teeth, talking about going to school, talking about coming back from school, talking about, going out to look for work, talking about helping his father, Joseph, in carpentry and whatever. So, day after day, if just one incident from each day was to be recorded, then we'll have 1,000 incidents. But we have in the Gospel according to Mark, I believe it has been divided up into what is called pericope, little pericopes, little snippets of information, small incidents, anecdotes, and there are only 83, if I remember correctly. That to be the number. So it's a far cry from the 1,000. So what that means that the writers are selecting some particular event to narrate, which is not bad. They want to give us a summary writing. They're not going to relate everything, so that's a given. But then, if Mark selects these 83, why would Matthew and Luke select also the similar 83? So if Mark decides to select 83 and Matthew decides to select, let's say, 100, and Luke decides to select, let's say, 200, so there's going to be some overlap. But what is found is that it's mostly an overlap. So all of the incidents which are in Mark are also in Matthew and Luke, except for about three of the incidents. So that's a large amount of overlap. And eventually the scholars drew the conclusion that Matthew and Luke copied Mark, and they added some of their other incidents and so on. They omitted some, but mostly they were copying Mark. And not everyone has drawn the same conclusion. Some other people root for another conclusion. Some say that Matthew was written first, Luke second, and Mark as a summary of the two. Like Mark, they say this is why it is similar, because Mark is just simply taking from the other two. And some say Matthew first, Mark second, and then Luke drawing from the other two, and so on. So you have different combinations, but mostly scholars now are convinced that Matthew and Luke were copying from Mark. And there are many good reasons for that, in addition to the one that I just mentioned. So the one I mentioned so far, the one reason is the similarity of basic outline. But there are many more arguments, and I don't have time to go into it now. That will be, detraction. It will take me too long to answer your question. So the basic answer to your question now is that this is what most scholars hold to, that Matthew was copying from Mark. Okay, and Abu Bakr Mustafa saying salam and wa alaikum salam, my brother. And sorry if I mispronounce your name. It's ALH, and I didn't know if it's Ahl or Al, how. But anyway, please forgive me for that. But Abu Bakr and Mustafa, these are easy for me, and I'm so glad that you're here. I thank you all for joining me today. And those are all of the comments that I see. And if I missed anyone, please forgive me for that. I see that Dawouni Peter Augustine is also here saying great. And thank you, Dawouni, for that. I'm so glad that you're here. So in closing, I'd like to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless you all in all of your respective countries and all of the people of your countries, whether it be Belgium or anywhere else. From where you are, please continue to follow my work and to support it the best way you can. You can send us a donation by going to our website, islaminfo.com, and click on the donate button. That's where you can donate for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help me in the mission of conveying the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the wider world. So next week, inshallah, we will continue with the Gospel according to Mark, unless some other topic gets to be overwhelming in my mind and I turn to that instead. But I want to finish this Gospel according to Mark, so we'll have the whole series on video. Inshallah, it will be a complete work to be studied and to be restudied. I see El Hajj Abu Bakr Mustafa telling us the right spelling. Okay, so it's El Hajj, yes, El Hajj. So ALH is for El Hajj. Now I learned something. You see, I learn something every day. So Al Hajj Abu Bakr Mustafa, thank you for that. And thank you all again for joining me. I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless you all, bless your families, bless your loved ones, bless all the people of your country. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless the entire world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala free this world from COVID-19 and from the coronavirus with all of its variants, whether the Omicron now or any other future variant that was there lurking in the background. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all human beings. May Allah protect the environment, protect the plants, protect the animals, and protect us all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the faith, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide people to that faith that He wants them to accept for their eternal salvation. Peace be with you all. Thank you for joining. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.